and I haven't seen Mr. Burke yet, but yes, it does feel like a minute ago that we were here, and I'm so glad to be standing in the same room where I graduated and delivered the commencement address in 1995, I believe, which probably sounds like a long time ago, but I swear it was only a minute. So thank you, everyone, and hello. It is such a pleasure to be back on the Derryfield campus and to be with all of you. I loved my time at Derryfield and look back on it as such a supportive, nurturing, and formative period. When I was asked to come here today, though, at first I wondered what I could possibly share that would seem helpful and relevant to adolescents of today. So I was a student from 1990 to 1996, and I'll tell you, here I was a student from 90 to 96. I'll tell you what stands out as the most different to me, I think, from our experiences, from your experience today and my experience then. Aside, of course, from the additions of the beautiful new buildings and fields that you enjoy. So when I was here, no one had cell phones or laptops, and we did not routinely communicate by email or text message, if at all. When we did research for our papers, we searched, if you can believe it, for microfiche and books in the library, certainly not the internet. When we wanted to reach someone, we picked up the phone and left messages on actual answering machines. We took photos on cameras, and then we brought the film to be printed at the camera store. We wrote down directions to where we were going because no one had GPS, and we left handwritten notes for one another in our lockers or desks if we needed to relay a message during the school day. That must make me sound very old. You can imagine, so, thinking through that at first glance, that list makes our experiences here seem worlds apart. And I did start to worry, how could I possibly come up with anything to share with you that would actually be helpful? So next I decided to do some research into what it must actually be like to be a teenager today. I sent out an email to a number of educator friends for some insight, and I gleaned a lot of fun and helpful information, I think. So after getting the responses to the email, I took some selfies to share on Instagram. I uploaded Snapchat to my iPhone. I did a few quizzes on BuzzFeed. I learned how to play Flappy Bird from a friend who had it on her phone. I played a few rounds of 2048. I did a Netflix marathon. I did some searches with Stumble Upon, and all in an effort to attempt to understand what your lives are like. Does any of that sound familiar? I hope so. I loved it all, and actually now use much of it as a result. But the more I learned about what's different, the more I reflected. And the more I began to think about, well, the differences I listed above seem pretty major because the new technology is such a huge part of how we relate to the world now. Truly what's most important about your formative adolescent years actually has very little to do with any of these innovations. In fact, a big part of the beauty of Derryfield is that the differences between our experiences over the years are really rather insignificant. What is enduring and similar about our experiences here have more to do with big themes and patterns that remain unaffected by technology, the things that will truly impact the course of your future. Some of these similarities that occur to me are the richness of this community, the opportunity to face adversity with support, whether you succeed or fail, and the courage and freedom to take risks. These things, I think, are truly the essence of Derryfield. So then I decided it might be the most helpful today to simply reflect on what stands out to me most poignantly about my time here, especially through a lens of what has served me the most in my life after Derryfield, and then end with what I believe to be the most powerful and enduring qualities here that will help us all save the world. So here we go. What stands out to me most about my time here? I have to start by saying that I loved my classes here and believed I earned a top-notch education. I felt well prepared for the rigors of Middlebury College, graduate school, and the world beyond. This, of course, is thanks in large part to the caliber of the faculty. I'm sure you've heard this before, but the level of devotion to you and your education by your teachers is probably unparalleled. The faculty sets the tone for the whole community here. That said, I must admit that when I recollect on what stands out to me as the most transformational about my experience here is actually what happens outside the classroom. I'll share a few examples from my own experience to give you a sense of what I mean. So, first example has to do with Mr. Sanborn, who's a trustee now of the school. As a ninth grader, when I was in ninth grade, he was the JV basketball coach, and I decided to play basketball that year. Mr. Sanborn is in the room with us today. I enjoyed the sport, but I would definitely not say that I had a serious talent for it. So So during one home game that winter, I had the ball at the side of the court after a call, and I felt stuck because I didn't see a good pass to make. So I quickly weighed my options and decided, it's a little embarrassing to admit, to illegally run without dribbling. Just run with the ball down the court until I could find a teammate close enough to pass the ball to. Obviously, this is highly illegal, and I knew it would warrant a call. But in the split second it took to make the decision, I took a bet that Coach Sanborn would be more likely to applaud my creative thinking for trying something innovative, even if likely to fail, or certain to fail, rather than giving up without trying, since I was in a tight spot. He was, in fact, amused, and when we later debriefed about it, he said he did understand my logic. The creative thinking and risk-taking were rewarded, somewhat, even though it resulted in the ball turning over to the other team. But I have to say that it would be very rare indeed to find a coach with that laser-like focus on nurturing the players in the way that the Derryfield coaches do, especially at the JV level. My second anecdote is from when I took the PSATs. I think it must have been as a 10th grader. And my math score, as my math teachers in the room might remember, was nowhere near where it needed to be. I was crushed, and I must have admitted my score to my math teacher at the time, who was Mr. Holland, who some of you may remember. I felt stuck, and like my doors to my future were suddenly slamming with this, gloomy PSAT score. So to my great relief, surprise, and fear, as some of you who might remember Mr. Holland, he offered to meet me 3 days a week for months before school to tutor me in math, simply out of the kindness of his heart. By sheer dint of that extra work with my saintly teacher, by the time I took the actual SAT, my math score went up to where I wanted it to be. I am sure that I am far from the brightest student of mathematics ever to cross Mr. Holland's path. So feeling that level of belief in me and my potential has actually paid great dividends over the years, and I remember it often. My third anecdote is about my wonderful advisor, Mr. Burke. Where is Mr. Burke? Is he open? I remember that he spent hours over the year talking with me and supporting me about many things, but especially when my parents were getting divorced. Of course, we talked mainly about my schoolwork, or as he alluded to, rehearsing speeches, or college, that kind of thing, my extracurricular involvement, but he always checked in with me personally to see how I was holding up and how he or anyone at school could be helpful. He was a rock to me during those years, and to this day, I hold him in the highest esteem as one of the most influential people in my life. Just to drive my point home about the faculty here being among the best in the world, my last anecdote is that I remember watching a Derryfield lacrosse game in Concord right after the end of my sophomore year at Middlebury, and this has to do with Nancy Stearns, who is also in the room today. So she was then the head of school, and she greeted me and asked how my father, who was a trustee of the school at the time, was faring as he had battled cancer for the previous 8 months. When I relayed to her that I had just discovered that his cancer had spread and was inoperable, she hugged me with the most sincerity I've ever felt in a hug. From there, she remained a great friend and supporter in the wake of my father's passing that summer, and like Mr. Burke, to this day, I count her as one of the great influences in my life. I'm looking up there, because I think she might be sitting up there, but I don't know where she is. Oh yeah, okay. These relationships, of course, were built and based on all the important content of what occurred in the classroom, of course. But what was most powerful to me were the ways these mentors supported me as a whole person, not only as a student in class. It did wonders for my sense of confidence and individuality at an age when we are all grappling with defining ourselves. I hope you too, all the students here, feel how your teachers care so deeply, perhaps more than any other educator or mentor you'll have, about your development as a person. So this brings me to the next section, the most powerful and enduring qualities here at Derryfield, and the similarities between our experiences. I believe that what is even more important at Derryfield, the most important at Derryfield, is that you are learning how to learn. Here you are encouraged to question, to make connections between classes, to pursue your passions, and to hone your analytical thinking. The workload demands that you learn time management and prioritization. And the content of your classes demands that you learn how to construct your own argument and defend it. And most importantly, that there is often no one right answer, but rather many correct ways of interpreting the facts. These are some of the qualities that you are honing here that will serve you most in your life beyond Derryfield and here. These are the things that will set you apart in the workplace, whether you're innovating, working as a team, juggling the demands of work and parenthood, making the case for your cause, building partnerships, or anything else that you embrace. The world needs more people who are truly discerning, as you are encouraged here to be. However, I must add that just because you are talented, discerning, and hardworking does not mean that you will always meet with success. And ultimately, that is a good thing. Another lesson you're having the privilege to learn now is how to face adversity. This is a big one, and not always an easy one, which is why it's a good one. In September of 2011, Paul Tuff, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, wrote a piece for the New York Times entitled, "What if the secret to success is failure?" In it, he profiles the head of the Riverdale School, Dominic Randolph, in the Bronx, who's attempting to reframe some of how we approach education. He criticized his school's sole emphasis on standardized testing for admission by describing, and quoting him, "The most critical missing piece is character. These essential traits of mind and habit that have deep roots in American history. Whether it's the pioneer in the Conestoga wagon or someone coming here in the 1920s from southern Italy, there was this idea in America that if you worked hard and showed real grit, then you could be successful." He goes on, "Strangely, we've now forgotten that. People who have an easy time with things, who get 800s on their SATs, I worry that these people don't get feedback, that these people do get feedback that everything they're doing is great. And I think that as a result, we're actually setting them up for long-term failure. When that person has to face up to a difficult moment," this is him talking, "then I think they're screwed, to be honest. I don't think they've grown the capacities to be able to handle that." The article goes on to describe the long process that a number of educators and academics embarked upon to hone in on what character strengths matter most for success. And they settled on these: zest, I love that, grit, self-control, social intelligence, gratitude, optimism, and curiosity. The challenge then, of course, is how to teach those, how to integrate them into the embodied life of a school. This headmaster in the Bronx is trying to build grit into the culture of the high school so students are well positioned to lead fulfilling lives beyond college. He explains, "The idea of building grit and building self-control is that you get through failure. In most highly academic environments in the United States, no one fails at anything." The article concludes with the sentence, "Randolph wants his students to succeed, of course. It's just that he believes that in order to do so, they first need to learn how to fail." And so I wish the same for you, and I know Derryfield does foster that kind of growth. You'll notice that my anecdotes earlier were actually about setbacks. A small one in the form of a play in a JV basketball game, a slightly larger one in my disappointing PSAT score, a still larger one in the form of what I learned during my parents' divorce, and the biggest one of them all, the near crushing blow that comes with the passing of a parent. These are the things that formed me and that I remember most poignantly. In the face of adversity, I always think about the adage about how steel is forged in fire. It is being in the fire that makes it stronger and ultimately gives it its definition. I want you to have that sense of purpose that comes from a fire being lit under you. And I think Derryfield is in a perfect position to help light the flame in the safest of all possible environments. Today, it is harder to teach and learn the kind of grit that our forebears knew, thanks to the generally high standard of living in our society. Yet it is essential for creating a purpose-driven, meaningful life. Are you taking healthy risks here? Are you finding meaning through failures, large and small? How does adversity show up in your life? So I've been talking about facing adversity, and I do have one nuance to add to that. We often think about grit and perseverance as applying a relentless effort and then eventually achieving your goal. But what about when you try and you don't succeed? These are perhaps the most rich and meaningful moments, if not the most heartbreaking. It's about what you learn when you're down, how you let that inform your choices moving forward, the grace that you exhibit along the way. This is what truly builds character and grit and ultimately fulfillment. With all this talk of setbacks and failure, where is the role for happiness and the pursuit of happiness that we all seek? After all, as some in this room remember, when I delivered the 1995 Founders Day address on the stage, my topic was optimism, and essentially how we can all be happy if we simply decide to be happy and find the good in life. I still believe that, and I would add that the pursuit of happiness is probably not the absolute purpose of life, and focusing on happiness as a goal may prove actually elusive and somewhat frustrating. So instead of focusing on happiness, I urge us to focus on making a difference, on simple pleasures, but not on the avoidance of pain. I do consider myself happy, and I would assert that it's mostly about feeling a part of a strong community, of devotion to those around me, to making a difference in the issues I care the most about, to helping loved ones through big life transitions, to learning from hard times and feeling myself grow stronger and more resilient. In a recent New York Times piece, you can tell I love the New York Times, entitled "What Suffering Does," David Brooks wrote, "Notice this phenomenon. When people remember the past, they don't talk about happiness. They don't only talk about happiness. It is often the ordeals that seem most significant. People shoot for happiness, but feel formed through suffering. People in this suffering circumstance often have the sense that they are swept up by some larger providence. Abraham Lincoln, for example, suffered through the pain of conducting a civil war, and he came out of that with the second inaugural. He emerged with the sense that there were deep currents of agony and redemption, sweeping not only through him, but through the nation as a whole, and that he was just an instrument for transcendent tasks." Brooks goes on to enumerate a number of other examples, but that excerpt gives you a sense of his message. Of course, I don't actually wish suffering or failure on you or upon anyone, but the point is that I encourage you to choose goals that revolve around a sense of meaning and purpose and risk-taking, rather than any notion of simply wanting happiness. As you encounter adversity along the way, there is no failure and setback, since those are the opportunities that will define you and ultimately motivate you. Here at Derryfield, you are building grit and character by being supported to take chances, to risk failure, and to define yourself and your future because of it. Your faculty is cheering you on night and day, and I hope you feel the strength of that web of support around you. If you can capitalize on those opportunities for growth, let them strengthen and motivate you, hone your sense of purpose from your setbacks, find meaning in your work, then you'll lead a truly successful life. The challenges facing us around the globe, as you know, are many. And here at Derryfield, if you take all the opportunities presented to you to build your grit and your character, you will indeed hold the promise to solving all the problems of the world. Thank you.